Good evening. Welcome to the February 21st Town of Los Gatos Joint Town Council Parking Authority meeting. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Stephen Leonardis. Councilmember Diane McNutt.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Przinski.
Here.
Vice Mayor Barbara Spector.
Here.
Mayor Steve Rice.
Here. And Councilmember Leonardis sends his regrets. He's on a family vacation. As is our custom, we have a future leader that's going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about Nathan Townsend. He's a first grader at Van Meter Elementary School. He was at the library opening on Saturday and went again on Sunday, along with thousands of other people, It was very cool. Thank you for coming. He was blown away with the children's room and had a great time checking out books like Pirates of the Caribbean, playing with friends in the outdoor area, and he went back on Sunday and checked out the computers and watched Cars 2 on the big screen. He loves music and acting and is rehearsing for a version of The Wizard of Oz that's going to be in June at the Addison Penzak Jewish Community Center. He played T-ball last year for the Red Wings. Isn't that a hockey team? Yeah. Okay. He played T-ball last year for the Red Wings and is going to play machine pitch this year. His favorite team is, of course, the Giants. And Dad is a little upset that Nathan got to witness the World Series title already when Dad had to wait over 35 years. Some of us waited longer than 35 years, okay? Other interesting facts. He loves his sister Addison and his dog Gabby, hopefully in that order. He enjoys reading, drawing, and Star Wars. Nathan's dad said Nathan is super excited to lead the pledge. In fact, he had a hard time going to sleep last night. He was so excited. Nathan, why don't you come on up here? Hold this.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Back this way. This way. Take it back. Very much. Let's give him one more round of applause. Thank you, Nathan. We have no closed session report this evening. So next on the agenda, I'm going to ask if anybody has any cell phones that you have on, would you please silence or mute them or turn them off altogether, as if anybody would ever actually do that. And if you wish to speak tonight on any item on or off the agenda, if it's off the agenda, you'll fill out one of these cards for verbal communications. And if you want to speak on one of the agenda items tonight, just put the little number up in the upper right for the agenda item, and you'll turn in the cards to the clerk on my left, your right. Council matters. Anybody? I'm going to start with one. For those of you that have not heard, our community lost a real contributor to cancer a couple of days ago. Paul Dubois passed away on February the 19th. He was a two-time president of the Los Gatos Community Foundation, was a key driver in the construction of the Linden Bandstand in Oak Meadow Park and the selling of 1,000 bricks that helped finance it. He was also a key driver in the funding for the LED Christmas lights on the tree in Town Plaza Park. He has been present at every tree lighting ceremony. He orchestrated the annual Cotillion fundraiser to raise money for local projects and scholarships for local students. He was a member of the Kiwanis, contributing to the success of the Fiesta de Arts, and was a lieutenant governor responsible for motivating the 17 Kiwanis clubs in the county. He was very involved with the Teen Center and was a guiding force creating the Venue-a-thon to raise money to support it. Some of his civic participation, including being a vice chairman of the Planning Commission, chairman of the Architectural Standards and Hillside Committee, a past chairman of the Community Services Commission. Many, many more projects and contributions demonstrating his passion for this community. Our hearts go out to his wife and true companion, Mary Tomasi Dubois, and to all of his family and friends, which include most, if not all of us in this room tonight. And I will be adjourning tonight's council meeting in his memory and in the honor of Paul Dubois, a true community treasure. Manager matters.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, only have one, but it's a big one. The last 10 days have been incredible with the opening of the new library. Before providing some key statistics, I did want to acknowledge and thank a few key groups. First, on behalf of the town staff and all our contractors, I must thank the town council today and past for your inspired vision, courageous leadership, and strong support to make this project a reality. In particular, the Council Ad Hoc Library Committee played a key role throughout, with Councilwoman McNutt serving every year and Council Members Spector and Przezinski serving their terms and Mayor Rice serving now. Second, I wish to acknowledge the administrative team that worked from project inception through financing, planning, and design, construction, and opening, led by Assistant Town Manager Pamela Jacobs, with Finance Director Steve Conway, Administrative Assistant Linda Seastrom, and Community Development Director Wendy Rooney, and her staff, Planner Suzanne Davis, Chief Building Official Michael Machado, and Building Inspector Mark Hildebrand. Third, Parks and Public Works has been the lead throughout bidding and construction, led by Director Todd Comperso, Town Engineer Kevin Rohani, and Project Manager Bruce Smith, and assisted by virtually every member of the PPW team. Fourth, the library team has lived and breathed this project long before it began, led by the library board and directors Peggy Conaway and Linda Dino, through all the managers, supervisors, librarians, clerks, and pages who worked long hours tirelessly throughout the planning, design, moving, and opening of this grand new facility. Fifth, all town staff have touched and been touched by this project, from HR to administration, from police patrol to dispatch, volunteering when needed, keeping the support and priority high, and supporting how important this is for our entire town. Last, we must recognize the incredible support of the Friends of the Library, raising 10% of the total project, providing over $2 million for the furniture, fixtures, and technology that help make the library special. The Friends' outpouring of financial support has only been exceeded by the incredible community response. Here are just a few stats from the first week of operations. 18,000 items were circulated, 15% of our total collection, the highest week ever by far. 14,000 visitors came through the doors, half of them during opening weekend alone. And nearly 700 library cards were issued in just 7 days, more than during the last 3 months of last year combined. Congratulations to our town. And now to share some of the discoveries to be found in the new library is Library Director Linda Dino.
Good evening, Council. Did you know you have a new library and it has some new services? I just stopped smiling today from ear to ear. There are an additional 9 computers for children, 4 new ones for teens, and an additional 18 for general use. Early literacy stations, one of them bilingual Spanish-English, teach skills that our children need to be ready to read when they enter school. The teen collection was increased by 50% with an opening day collection funded by the Barbara Kaysen Trust. It's hard to express the improvement in the display and use of the history area, especially the acquisition of the Los Gatos death records from the History Museum. And one wonders how folks crowding into the group study room or spending some silent, solitary hours in the quiet study room managed just 1 month ago. I observed a couple with coffee and books in hand on the second floor and overheard this invitation: let's sit down here and read in the forest. And a certain regular has been seated near the fireplace, newspaper in hand, every morning shortly after opening. But be advised, if you want to sit in a nurdle nook, be prepared to lurk and wait and pounce when one is vacated.
And one last council matter that kind of follows on the library. One of the things that our new library has is a new conference room, which I will be using this Saturday from 2 to 4 in the afternoon for my first mayor's office hours, which I invite the members of the community to drop by, talk with me about anything of concern to them in the town, and I wouldn't mind hearing why you love living here as well. So with that, I'm going to move down there. I have a presentation to make, and I think Jane Darwin from the Morning Rotary Club and Bill Pache from the Lunch Club will join me. Behind the desk. You have friends that you wanted to bring up as well? I'm not going to stop you.
They're going to appear.
Can you join us? Come on up.
They're going to. If there's an excuse for a Rotary moment, we take it.
I figured that.
Absolutely. This is a makeup.
Yes, this is a makeup, we decided.
And there's nobody left in the audience.
Yes.
So it's my pleasure to issue a proclamation on behalf of the town for the Rotary Clubs of Los Gatos, and it reads as follows. Whereas Rotary International, founded on February 23rd, 1905 in Chicago, Illinois, USA, is the world's first and one of the largest nonprofit service organizations with a membership of 1.2 million volunteers. And whereas the Rotary Club of Los Gatos, chartered in 1924, and the Los Gatos Morning Rotary, chartered in 2003, are two of Rotary International's 34,000 worldwide clubs. And whereas Rotary in 1985 launched Polio Plus and spearheaded efforts with the World Health Organization, U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and UNICEF to immunize the children of the world against polio, and raised more than $200 million towards a $200 million challenge grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to eradicate polio worldwide. And whereas, this is the longest proclamation I've ever seen in my life. Whereas,
1.2 million of us.
yeah,
remember.
Rotary is the world's largest privately funded source of international scholarships and promotes international understanding through scholarships, exchange programs, and humanitarian grants. And whereas the Rotary Club of Los Gatos funds and sponsors community volunteers to provide assistance to the Los Gatos High School, Fisher Middle School, Union Middle School, Loma Prieta School, Lakeside School, the High School Speech Contest, college scholarships for Los Gatos High School, Lee High School, and Independence High School students, assistance to St. Luke's Kitchen, the Los Gatos Library, Samaritan Cancer Center, Auxiliary of Good Samaritan Hospital, CERT Emergency Preparation, CASA, Center for Living with Dying, Faces of Hope, and Adopt a Family, hosts Enterprise Leadership Conference in Camp Ryla to develop our future leaders, support the Kids Fishing Day, YMCA, Boy Scout Troop 501, Girl Scouts and Youth Science Institute, and financial resources and volunteers for the Fisher House and Operation Yellow Ribbon to support local military personnel and veterans. And whereas, don't get ahead of me, the Los Gatos Morning Rotary Club funds and sponsors community volunteers to provide assistance to high school speech contest, college scholarships for Los Gatos High School, assistance to St. Luke's Kitchen, funding for the Los Gatos Library, assistance to Enterprise Leadership Conference and Camp Ryla to develop our future leaders, provides an annual Day at the A's for underprivileged youth, Christmas caroling for seniors in Los Gatos, assistance to the Los Gatos Sea Scouts, Los Gatos High School Theater Improvement Project, assistance to the Los Gatos Education Foundation, funding for the Los Gatos High School Music Supporters, assistance to Light My Way Children's Program, assistance to the Lions, funding for the Mark Benoit and Todd Beamer Scholarship Fund, funding for the Community Foundation, sponsors art and education for the young at heart, and more. Now, therefore, be it resolved, I, Steve Rice, by the virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the town of Los Gatos, do deem it appropriate and do hereby proclaim February 23rd, 2012 as Rotary Day in the town of Los Gatos and encourage all citizens to join in recognizing Rotary International for its more than 107 years of service to improving the human condition in local communities and around the world. Proclaimed as 21st day of February 2012 in the town of Los Gatos, county of Santa Clara, state of California. Bill? And I'll put in a shameless plug. I happen to be a Rotarian. So. All right.
Thank you. Now we're blind. We'll be working with the Lions more often now.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on our agenda is the consent calendar, or consent agenda. First, I'm going to ask if any council members wish to pull an item. I am going to pull item 4 myself. Any other council members wish to pull any items? Seeing none. Any member of the public wish to pull a consent item? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion on the consent calendar. Vice Mayor.
Move to approve the consent calendar except for.
I second that.
Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. I'll move forward to the, after the public hearing, or after other business. And the Rotarians are still out there having fun. Next comes verbal communications. This is an opportunity for anybody to speak on any item that is not on tonight's agenda. I have one card, but you have time if you wish to speak. Please fill out a card and give it to the clerk on my left, your right. First card I have for verbal communications is Cindy Vindasius. Am I close? Vindacious. Wouldn't have gotten it, but thank you. Please.
Hi, I'm Cindy Vindacious, and I'm a resident of the town of Los Gatos, and I'm here to express my strong opposition to the Hillbrooks plan to expand its enrollment by 99 students. My objection is based on the following 3 points. First, kids in my neighborhood can't walk to school today. I have lived on the corner of Rosalie Court and Marchmont Drive for over 13 years. I have a daughter at Fisher in 7th grade and a son at Blossom Hill in 4th grade. I have never been able to let my kids walk to school alone unattended by an adult. I am not, of the 40-plus kids in our immediate neighborhood, I am also unaware of any child who is allowed to walk unsupervised to school. It's simply not safe. Over the last 2 years, the Los Gatos Unified School District has made a huge effort in promoting safe routes to school, such as Fresh Air Fridays and a lot of other incentives for the kids to walk to school. Unfortunately, the kids in our neighborhood have been unable to participate due to the current volume of traffic, unsafe speeds, distracted drivers, lack of sidewalks, and no supervision at key crosswalks. My second reason for opposition is Hillbrook seems to consistently and repeatedly violate its current CUP. Last summer, Hillbrook, for the first time in 13 years that I have lived there, opened its campus to various summer programs, allowing drop-off and pick-up at any time during the day, and was not limited to currently enrolled Hillbrook students. The increase in traffic was dramatic, to say the least, and greatly impacted what our neighborhood has grown accustomed to as our summer reprieve. Several complaints were made to the Planning Commission last year regarding Hillbrook's violation of its current CUP, which have yet to be resolved. In reviewing the school's website, we see that Hillbrook plans to offer extended summer programs again this summer. We believe Hillbrook plans to repeat the violations which occurred last summer with no regard to its current CUP. And lastly, I want to bring to your attention that the City of San Jose recently approved the development of 94 family homes in the Guadalupe Mines area, which actually feeds into Blossom Hill and Fisher currently. This project will greatly increase the traffic on an already congested streets of Kennedy, Shannon, Hilo, Englewood, and Blossom Hill Road as these families try and get their kids to school on time in the morning. In summary, in the event that this issue is brought to your attention, and I hope that it's not, I hope it gets taken care of by the Planning Commission, I urge you to consider the issues I've raised in that it's unsafe for kids to walk to school in these neighborhoods now. The neighborhood already carries a huge burden in monitoring Hillbrook's consistent and repeated existing CUP violations and the Guadalupe Mines project. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Mike Frangidakis.
Mr. Mayor, Town Council, fellow citizens, as many of you know, I am Operation Yellow Ribbon co-chairman here in Los Gatos, and every Veterans Day I participate as a member of the state military in some veterans organizations where we visit different towns and cities, our neighboring towns and cities. And at those locations, we honor the veterans of those towns and cities. And this year, on Veterans Day, as I visited those neighboring towns, I noticed something, that the town of Los Gatos has no such memorial to its veterans, and I thought that was wrong. And so I'm here to spearhead a organization composed of all of the service clubs in this town, the businesses and the citizens of this town involved in this project. And I would like the town council to make it official, possibly tonight or some other time, that we spearhead a memorial project under the auspices of town council in these regards. Thank you.
Thank you. We can't take any action tonight because this was not an agendized item, but thank you for your input.
And
Did you have something, Mr. Manager?
Mr. Mayor, as Mr. Frangidakis knows from our prior talks, the mayor and I have met with representatives of all the service clubs, and they have agreed to undertake this as a joint project for 2012 as part of the Jubilee Year celebration. And we know that Mr. Frangidakis is the representative of one of the clubs. We have representatives identified for two other clubs, and the mayor will be convening that first meeting over the next 2 to 3 weeks, once we have all the appointees. And then an action item would come to council for your consideration.
Thank you. I have no other cards for verbal communication, but I'll throw it out there one more time. Seeing none, we will move on to agenda item number 7, conditional use permit application U-11-018, 15043 Los Gatos Boulevard, property owner and applicant Robert and Georgiana Spinazzi. And we'll start with the staff report. Jennifer Savage.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. The subject property was annexed into the town in 1991. At that time, the use was deemed non-conforming since it did not have a Town of Los Gatos conditional use permit, or CUP. Town code permits the property owner 20 years to obtain a CUP. The applicant is requesting to allow a bar, known as the Boulevard Tavern, to continue to operate. They are not proposing any modifications at this time. The Planning Commission reviewed the subject application on January 25th and recommended approval with minor modifications to the conditions. This concludes staff presentation, and we are available for any questions.
Questions of staff? Seeing none, I don't have a card from the applicant, but I see the applicant here. Why don't you come on up, and you have, I think it's 10 minutes to present your case if you'd like to. Why don't you come to the podium?
I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Gigi Spinazzi. My husband and I own the Boulevard Tavern property and have for many years, and we're really grateful the town is looking at this issue, and of course we're hoping for approval so things can stay in a status quo until the town knows, and we all know, how the North 40 is going to develop. I'm a terrible public speaker, so bear with me.
It's okay.
And so I really did not come prepared. I just came hopeful.
Okay.
Okay?
Let me ask if any members of the council have questions for Mr. Spinazzi. Councilmember McNutt?
Maybe I have a question for you. So I understand that from reading the transcript of the Planning Commission, my feeling is that you folks are pretty new to this process, this public process business.
We haven't had many cases where we've needed to come to the town, no.
Yeah. I'm a little, and I understand that both the property owner and the business owner are fine with the way the condition currently is set up, where if the circumstances change and so on. I'm actually a little uncomfortable with that, and so that's why I say I maybe have a question. I don't know what my question is, except just to tell you that I'm kind of uncomfortable with that, and if you could give me any additional comment on why you are okay with it, other than you just want to get this paperwork behind you and be able to continue in business. No. That would be helpful for me.
Okay, I'll try to. You're asking us why we're accepting these conditions, or that we're amenable with them, right?
Yes, and in particular the one where if circumstances change,
it's going to be changed.
That you have up to maybe just a 1-year notice.
When we bought the property, it was our intent many years ago to open a restaurant, and we were charmed by this particular piece of property by location and the fact that it had a bar, had a liquor license. And so it was well placed to become, we wanted a steakhouse in Los Gatos. My husband and I both graduated from Los Gatos High School, and there used to be a wonderful old restaurant called the Red Tavern. Well, when we went to the town, we were soon made aware of what you all refer to as the North 40, and this had to be, Mikey, how many years ago? 15? And so suddenly we were bar owners, and we hadn't really ever planned on being bar owners, and particularly an unusual bar full of history to boot. So we ran the bar, and then we hired Mikey, and then we finally sold the bar to Mikey. We kept the property and sold the property. And he's handled it so well through these years, and he's done an amazing job of cleaning it up and making it a place. You know, I haven't gone in there myself very often. I went in a couple of times this last month, and I really enjoyed myself. It was very comfortable. I liked the clientele. So we don't want to be a block to what the development of that area is, because we realize how important it is to this town. Maybe we'll get lucky, and as the process evolves, we'll become part of the process. We don't know. My husband and I were in our 70s. We're looking at retirement. We are retired. And so it's an investment property for us, but we're not ready to sell it. We want to keep it there and really support Mikey 100%. It may evolve. Listen, we were told many times that any conditional permit was never going to happen. The bar was closing down the year 2011. And, you know, things got hopeful. So we just want to keep the status quo. We'd like to keep it running. Mikey's put his whole heart and soul into it. My husband and I, it would enable us to hold the property. We're going to hold it anyway. We just don't want to hold it sitting there and being vacant and empty. And so it seems like an agreeable situation to us.
Thank you, that was helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I'm going to follow up on what Ms. McNutt asked you. Is it your sense that in order to get the CUP, you have to accept the condition that it be revisited when circumstances change?
All right, I'm really not that familiar, but instinctively, yes.
Would it be your goal or your objective, and maybe this should be directed to the business owner also, would it be preferable to you to have the conditional use permit keep on going or have it reviewed when circumstances change?
Well, the answer is obvious, but...
Well, it isn't obvious. That's why I'm asking.
Well, the unconditional, just to have it go forth, would be, of course, the most desirable, particularly for Mikey. But the continuation in the worry and the concern, that's a variable too. And we just want to get on with business. Things change, as you all know, or maybe, and I don't know, you know, how advanced your plans are for this area and whether it's going to get resolved in 10 years, 2 years, 2 months. And like I said before, I'm not involved in that, and I know you guys are working very hard to do the best. And we don't want to be in the way of that either. We really would like to see, we're very attached to Los Gatos. Our whole lives have been spent here. So, you know, of course we would like it one way, but we don't want to be, I don't know, just continually in the process. Does that make sense to you?
Somewhat.
Yeah, I know it's pretty vague, but it's the truth.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Brzezinski.
Well, first of all, Ms. Benazzi, you present very well.
Oh, thank
so,
you. My little
you know,
shaking
I think
voice.
you underestimate how well you present. To follow up to the questions of the Vice Mayor and Councilwoman McNutt, I guess I would wonder why we would impose that review at the outset that would make you different than any other of the business owners and property owners that exist as your neighbors at this point in time. When the North 40 develops, my assumption is it will develop as a single entity, and at that juncture, both the residential units and the business commercial units will be subject to the changes that are envisioned, and to isolate your business or your property for extraordinary consideration does not necessarily make sense to me. And so I understand what your anxiety is. I also hear you saying clearly that your preference would be that you would receive your conditional use permit without that particular restriction. I think the Planning Commission spent an awful lot of time trying to understand what was going on and why that was one of the conditions of the approval, and ultimately came to the resolution that we see in front of us tonight. So, you know, I think I'm going to direct myself to the staff on this, but I do believe that you're saying that were that condition not there, you would be probably more satisfied.
Of course.
Okay. Could we ask the staff to comment to
I'd
that?
like to say something. The issue, what I thought I heard at the
Planning Commission.
Planning Commission was when the property was annexed, it was understood that this bar was going to be only given, they couldn't shut it down. They had to allow it to run for a certain amount of years. And so it was made very clear. So the feeling was by one particular planning commission person, why give away something the town already has control of? And that's the Boulevard Tavern. I don't know how many of you know the history of it. It was originally a Hells Angels bar. Mikey has worked long and hard with the town and with the police department. He's well regarded. And it was difficult times getting, and we had no idea when we bought this property, absolutely no idea. So and I actually kind of understood him. He was saying, why do we give away what we already have? And since this little piece of property is sitting right in the middle, I believe, of what you're all working so hard to resolve, his hesitancy was based on the fact that we could become a problem. We don't sound like a problem now. I'm kind of advocating something that's, you know, not in my favor, but I did understand his point, and so I guess that's why I was amenable to it.
Okay. Would you care to comment, Ms. Savage?
The condition is not a required condition. The council could choose to not include it as part of the approval. Staff included it as part of the applicant's offer to put a condition in there for subsequent review in consideration of the anticipated development of the North 40. A similar condition was put on a conditional use permit in 1999. Less text, but it essentially said it should be reviewed every 5 years, and the use was approved as an interim use in the event that the North 40 area is developed.
Thank you. Okay.
Any further questions? Thank you.
Thank you. You've all been very kind. Thanks.
Don't go away. You'll have 5 minutes at the end if we have other speakers. Anybody else? I have no cards on this item. Did anybody else wish to speak on this agenda item? Okay. Ms. Spinazzi, did you want to come up and rebut anything you just heard? Okay. Then I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and look to council for further conversation or a motion. Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. Out of full disclosure, I will say I have never been in the bar, and I've lived here for a really long time, and I probably should have made a field trip, but I just didn't get around to it this last weekend. What we always talk about when we're talking about conditional use permits is that it runs with the land and it's not with the particular business. So what we are permitting there is the use of a bar, and that reminds me, I do have a question for staff, which right now appears to be a well-run neighborhood establishment, according to the testimony that I saw in the Planning Commission transcript, and from what I heard the description tonight. It had a more interesting past. It can have a more not interesting, but a different kind of future. And that's all within the description that comes along with the CUP. Let me interrupt my train of thought here to ask a quick question of staff. There's no restaurant use attached to this. Is there anything in there? How much food service can they have without coming back in? Would it require a whole change in conditional use permit?
That's hard to say at this time. The conditional use permits are approved with certain conditions, and it's possible that someone could come in with a different business plan and still be considered a bar, or not trigger the substantial departure from the existing conditional use permit.
Okay, so it's a maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. So as things evolve, it could be that this bar would transition slowly into a combination restaurant bar, or cafe bar, or it can go upscale. If Fern bars ever come back, you can go back into that. I mean, businesses have their own business plans, and they come and go. But again, from a land use perspective, conditional use permit says do we think it's okay to have a bar in this particular area? It's been there for a really long time. It apparently has had no calls for service in the last decade and a half, or very few, doesn't show up on the radar at all. So I am fine with approving this conditional use permit without the extra restriction. As I mentioned earlier, I'm uncomfortable with it. It does not seem fair to me to be imposing this on this business when, as Mr. Przinski said, we have all these other businesses and landowners up and down Las Gatos Boulevard adjacent to what we call the North 40, which is the, usually referred to it, which is the undeveloped area. There's an operational agreement. There are safety nets in place if it changes and gets unruly. So I just don't think we need that extra restriction. And it's far too vague for me when you say certain circumstances and what's appropriate. Well, that's really a judgment call. So that's kind of where I'm at, and I guess I'll wait and hear what other people have to say before leaping into a motion, unless someone wants to go ahead and make that leap right now.
Vice Mayor.
Well, I was going to second her motion.
Okay.
All right. Well, if that wasn't a motion, then first I'll make the motion, and I'll see if I get a second. I'm going to move to approve the application subject to the conditions in the attachment with the exclusion of, I think it's paragraph 4, which provides for subsequent review.
Second.
Now, may I speak to the motion?
Please do.
Thank you. When I first read this, I was concerned and I was uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable with the fact that normally our conditional use permits run with the land, and this one was not. It wasn't clear to me why the property owner or the business owner was making this concession. And I found the testimony at the Planning Commission meeting very interesting. I mean, I heard things. I have visited the bar when I was checking out the North 40 about a year or so ago. And so I found what the testimony was about the current bar use and how the people like it over there, and I like uptown versus downtown. I thought that was all really cool. And so I actually, like I said, was not comfortable. I am much more comfortable with this CUP going forward without this subsequent review.
Councilmember Przinski.
Well, I'd like to, since I seconded the motion, just kind of affirm my own sense that's coincident with the Vice Mayor and Councilwoman McNutt. What's fair is fair. And what we have out there is a whole potential for a future development that will be an extremely exciting component to our town. But it doesn't call out any special exemption or exception for this particular property in relationship to any others. I think the operative term is fair. I believe that this motion, as has been presented by the Vice Mayor, is appropriate, and I think that we are fully able to accomplish what our future goals will be without unnecessarily burdening the current owners and the current management of that bar. So I think this historic place will continue. And I have no doubt that it will continue to be managed in the same way it's been in its recent history. I do remember its previous history, and only by, anecdotal evidence, obviously. But in terms of this, I think that this motion should carry, and it will be a benefit to the community. And when the North 40 gets developed, and then hopefully there will be an opportunity for the current bar owner to have a chance to be part of that development as well.
No further discussion. We have a motion and a second. I'm going to go ahead and call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Not, I'm afraid not. Thank you very much, though. Okay, moving on to other business. Item number 8, first of all, members of the council, you'll notice we had a desk item on this. And we're going to get our 2011-2012 mid-year budget performance and status reports for the 6 months ending December 31st, 2011.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Tonight we're going to be presenting our mid-year budget review. And if I can get to this to work, I'm going to talk a little bit about our outline tonight. We're going to talk about the budget status at mid-year, recommended budget adjustments, our 5-year forecast, and finally, our budget development process. I'm going to go ahead and start with our revenue operating trends, and I think I'm going to have the clerk, and I'll guide her through, help me out here. Beginning with the next slide, thank you. We currently have a $110,000 decrease in VLF property tax backfill. This is primarily related to state takes as a part of their budget balancing efforts. The second item is a $800,000 decrease in sales tax. And this is primarily due to the loss of sales tax collected on Netflix video streaming subscriptions when they were combined with the DVD membership. The good news here is that it's been partially offset by some growth across the sales tax category board. And so originally we were going to have to decrease this by $1 million, and so instead it's $800,000, so that is good news. Again, the next item is $203K in increase in franchise fees. This is primarily a budgeting issue. We didn't estimate correctly because we didn't have our franchise fees receipts in at the time, so we did an adjustment here. Next item. A $67K increase in TOT. This is a great sign for us. There's some increases in travel and tourism, and we are seeing an uptick in the economy, some recovery here in our TOT. We're very happy to see that. The next is $86K increase in intergovernmental fees. Again, this is a slight adjustment in budgeting estimates. And the last, 114 decrease in interest income. Again, the revenues are low due to a lack of returns on our LAIF and also our Treasury bills. So the total recommended adjustments, if you do to the next one, please, is $668K, and we're going to talk a little bit about how this all plays out in our 5-year forecast. But if we can go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about how expenditures are doing. Operating expenditure trends are doing as expected. We have cost reduction strategies in place. Some of these are the unpaid furloughs. Also, we've done a redeployment of staff and strategic hiring freezes. Our expenses are below the 50% budgeted level. They're actually approximately about 47%, so that's tracking excellent. And as a result, we are anticipating some possible year-end expenditure savings. Next slide, thank you. And then now we'll go and talk about the expenditure adjustments. We have vehicle equipment replacement adjustments to make. The $217K for the street sweeper, we did have one that was damaged by fire, so we received a reimbursement from ABAC, so we're prepared to replace that item. And the next is $47K for police vehicle computer equipment. We inadvertently left this out when we came to you as a part of the 11-12 budget process. So this is a cleanup item. You need to make sure that your police vehicles actually have the equipment to work properly. So we thought that was important to bring it forward to you this evening. And then finally, capital improvement projects. We have $11K for ADA accessible improvements. This is primarily for the design work for University Avenue. It's ADA accessible sidewalk along University Avenue from Lark Avenue South to the new sports park. And then the other is a pedestrian and bicycle improvement at Lark and Los Gatos Boulevard. And again, this item will address ADA access issues. And then with that, I'm going to turn it over to the Finance Director, Steve Conway, to give us an update on where we are with our 5-year forecast.
Thank you, Mayor Rice and members of the council. I'll go into the update of our 5-year forecast, which we prepared for our mid-year, and we had given you some indication of this at your recent retreat, and we have done some more work on that. And the graph I'm that we have before you this evening gives us a snapshot, at least at this time, of where we think the town will be as of this fiscal year and then into the future. And you'll notice first off that, you know, the red line is our expenditure trends, the green line, or excuse me, the red line is our expenditure trends, the green line is our revenue trends, and the more orange line is, I'll explain that in just a second, but where the two on the first year, which is 12-13, the 2 years are, or 11-12, excuse me, are the 2 years where we are in balance. That's the 11-12 estimate. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that. We, as Jenny had pointed out, we do have some revenue declines this year. However, we also had some revenue gains across some categories. The bottom line is that we did need some money. We had about approximately $800,000 to $900,000 set aside from last year's closing fiscal results that we had communicated to council that we would hold in reserve to fill in a gap that would be required due to the RDA dissolution, which we became aware of last summer. It was actually, there were discussions last spring, and we did not have a quantification. We had some estimate of approximately $600,000 to $800,000 of possible financial impact to the town, and as everyone is probably aware, the RDAs are now dissolved, and we are absorbing that cost into our budget, and that affected fiscal year 11-12, and thankfully there was adequate savings last year to set that money aside, and we will be using that. So the 11-12 budget is balanced. However, it does rely on some funding from the fiscal year 10-11, which we had planned on using. So, the wild card in that was, would we have enough year-end savings to not only set aside that money, but also to provide the two fundings that we had planned for our capital, which was $800,000 and another $800,000 to our budget reserves, and we met all those goals. So, just wanted to make sure council was aware of that. You can, the following year, in fiscal year 12-13, you can see that there is a gap between our revenue, the green line, and our expenditure trends, and that gap is approximately $1.8 million. And the orange line portrays in fiscal year 13-14 that if all of the budget right-sizing occurred through either service delivery reductions and those type of things that are on a permanent nature, we would have a much smaller gap to fill between revenues and expenditures in 13-14. The red line above that, the point above it, would show a large gap in 13-14 if we did none of that measure and used all reserves to solve the problem. So staff will be, as you know, we have gone through our own preliminary service delivery review, and we went through that with council at your strategic planning session, and we have identified, I believe, $7 million worth of service level or fee adjustments in all categories. Yeah. So we will be bringing forth to address this $1.8 million budget. We will be, as council asked us, the town staff will be bringing forth a recommended budget which will incorporate a number of those strategies to solve that $1.8 million gap. And the gaps shown here are exacerbated by news of this Friday, which were not included in this, which you have a desk item for. We received late Friday afternoon, without much prior notification that I'm aware of, cities across the state were informed by PERS that there's some change to possibly contemplated to their discount rate, which will affect employer PERS rates. And our best estimate right now in that will affect beginning fiscal year 13-14, so it's not in our immediate budget future, but it's something that we have to keep our eyes on. And the worst case scenario would that red line would be impacted negatively by $580,000 increased expenditure if the state of California PERS adopted the lowest discount rate. We don't think that's likely to happen, but it is. That's the worst case scenario. There's probably a lower amount than that, but $580,000 is our biggest exposure based on the information that we have right now. And the revenues, I will say, and Jenny did point out, and I'm pleased to say that taking Netflix revenues out of our portfolio, we are seeing signs of recovery. We're averaging, as of our latest data, across all of our sectors and categories of businesses, a 4.5% growth rate. And we have built 3.5 into our 12-13 estimate to be a little conservative, and 2% in the years beyond that just to be conservative. But we're seeing, hopefully, a turnaround for our businesses, and that's been very encouraging. So in spite of the reduction in Netflix, our other businesses are performing well. And this is the same information that we've been shared, that we have had shared with us with finance directors across Santa Clara County. And that ends my presentation. If council has questions about that, we will take questions when we're through presenting.
And we do have one more slide. I believe the finance director covered a little bit about this. There is a gap, obviously, between revenues and expenditures of $1.8 million, which we discussed at the council retreat. The council also did give staff direction in terms of going through a comprehensive service prioritization process. So we do have our some direction, and we will begin that process shortly. Also listed is that we're going to continue to look at revenue trends as also and also expenditure impacts as noted in the desk item related to PERS, and also any of the impacts that might be associated with the dissolution of RDAs. And then finally, we'll just continue to implement strategies that council adopted as a part of the 11-12 budget. Obviously, those include unpaid furloughs. We are tightening our belts with our supplies and materials, and really taking a strong focus on overtime and using those hours very prudently. That concludes my report, and we'd be happy again to answer any questions.
Questions for Finance? Councilmember Brzezinski.
I'd like to go back to your desk item, Mr. Conway. So this proposed $600K increase, or $580 increase, this is not locked. This is a potential. No. And what are the factors that would change that, or what are the conditions that that are being studied at this time to help us understand the impacts? Because it looked from your graph like in a couple of years we're going to be in fairly decent shape. And this looks to me to be a somewhat difficult situation to accommodate in that context.
Thank you, Councilmember Brzezinski. There's three factors that the California PERS board will be getting information from staff. There are three primary factors that affect the discount rate, and not to bore everyone with financial terms, but a discount rate is the long-term expected performance of the PERS portfolio. And right now, that long-term performance over the life of the plan is 7.75%. If the discount rate gets lowered to 7.25, which is a factor of price inflation, wage inflation, and what they call the real discount rates, if those three factors are compelling enough to lower the discount rate to 7.25, if there's a lower assumption of earnings on a portfolio, then the public entities must pay a higher employer rate on payroll to make up for that loss of long-term earnings. And so this becomes a function of math, science, some bit of art in guessing the future portfolio performance. I can tell you that PERS has had some years of 28% returns, but they've also had years of negative 24% returns. So a lot of this is guessing, mathematical guessing of how future events may unfold. I can tell you also that this process will affect not only our town by the 580,000, but cities across the state, and also the state is the largest single employer, the state of California. So it's a very sizable financial impact to the state of California. So it becomes a political process also. And there's politics are weighing in along with the science and the actuarial sciences that go along with these rates. So our best guess is likely that Last year, a similar measure was proposed, and the board settled on a middle position. In our case, 7.75 dropping to 7.25. A middle position would be 7.5. And what's in these numbers you see up here very much, I guess I'm fairly conservative, but we had built in approximately that 7.5 level is what you have before you. Not seeing the bad news would make that red line go up if they went to a 7.25. But if they arrive at about a 7.5 rate, putting it down from 7.75, then this graph, as the numbers in the 5-year plan that we've developed right now, fairly represent that. Because we assumed a 4% growth versus they're now saying potentially an 8% growth.
Yeah. And I just wanted to give credit to the finance director and finance staff. The red line going up from next year to the following year already assumed a growth in PERS rate. The worst case would go even beyond that, and that's the additional $600,000. The total range of impact by the PERS decision on March 13th is about a 1.2, 1.4 million is our estimate. We've already assumed half of that in the 5-year forecast. So there's a very small possibility that it could get better on the PERS rate. I don't believe that's likely. We think it's conservative to go with the numbers we have here, but we did want to give you the disclosure that as of Friday, PERS has identified not just that it could be flat and it could go up to what we've shown here, but it could go up $600,000 higher. And we think this is the right place to be for now, especially since it's a year out. It doesn't affect next year, it affects the following year, and we'll have time to adjust and plan. But we did want to disclose this late-breaking news to you.
Thank you. Other questions? Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to thank staff for the clear, almost, verbal presentation, the clear written presentation, the excellent work that staff did in bringing forth that huge array of budget adjustments we might do at the council retreat, and all the efforts to trim expenses whenever possible, and to be conservative. I like conservative because that's what's allowed us to build up the nice reserves that are there for a rainy day. That being said, I would like to suggest to council that we add an additional expenditure adjustment, and that would be, and I did ask the manager to price out this today in case anyone else besides me was interested in it. We heard earlier tonight that our library is glorious and very popular, which we already knew. And what I noticed, since I live 600 steps away from the library, so I'm in the vicinity a lot, is that there are people there waiting for it to open every day, whether it's at 10 a.m. or 1 p.m. on the weekend. And as I've talked to people in the community, the ones who are so eager to get there who've not had an opportunity to visit yet, frequently are people who work during the week and they just don't have the opportunity. It's going to be the weekend. We lost the Saturday morning hours in a previous budget cut, and I would like to talk about the possibility of opening the library on Saturday mornings so that it opens at 10 a.m. and runs till 5 p.m. rather than 1 to 5 p.m. through the remainder of the fiscal year, so that over the next 4 months we give our community the greatest opportunity to come and visit this wonderful asset that we have in our community and really get to know it and be comfortable with it. So the manager can share what that would cost us to do.
Staff actually looked at 2 different models. One would be adding the 3 hours back Saturday morning, but not taking away the evening hour we added on Tuesdays, I believe it was 3 years ago, when we took away the Saturday morning hours. So it'd be a net increase of 3 hours. On Saturdays from 10 to 5 through the end of the fiscal year, it's 20 Saturdays would cost $35,000 for this fiscal year. And then if there were any expectation of Continuing it the following year, that would be at least $100,000 additional expense next year. The other option staff prepared that operationally the library finds easier would be to add 1 hour to each day, to go from, instead of 1 to 5 on Saturday, Sunday, to 12 to 5, and add 1 hour each day, and that would cost $25,000, annualized at $65,000-$75,000 a year.
Vice Mayor.
I'm
sorry.
Can I just finish?
Please.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Vice Mayor. I just wanted to finish up my spiel after we had that information. And that is I understand operationally it might be easier to do the 12 to 5, but I don't think it has the same impact and opportunity to the community as making a Saturday morning available. Families are so busy on the weekends, and so having a morning and an afternoon as opposed to a lunchtime and afternoon available, I think, is better. And then the other point I wanted to make is that we do have really nice reserves, and I'm appreciative of that. We have far more than what we have in our policy, and I certainly don't want to spend those down frivolously, but we are in the business of providing service to the community, and I think this is a justified withdrawal from our savings account. Now I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I also, my question was of staff, because it seemed to me that beginning at 10 a.m. on Saturday made a lot of sense. And I didn't understand why there was a suggestion that we only move it back 1 hour to noon. So I just needed more clarification, if I could, on that, because it didn't make sense when you said it.
Okay. The request from the council member McNutt was to look at expanding to 10 a.m. on Saturday. In discussing the schedule with library staff, they said they could do that, and the cost would be $35,000 through the end of this year, which is clearly a council decision. Operationally, they preferred going to 12 both days, adding 2 hours for the weekend. Largely for hours consistency, so it'd be 12 to 5 both days. Right now, the schedule is 11 to 8 Monday, Tuesday, 11 to 8 Monday, Tuesday, 10 to 6 Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and 1 to 5 Saturday, Sunday. They thought changing that to 12 to 5 keeps it a more consistent schedule rather than Saturdays being 10 to 5, Sundays 1 to 5. Operationally, the other issue is they need to provide lunch coverage. Once you're over 4 or 5 hours of a shift, you then need to have temporary staff come in to do lunch coverage by bargaining unit contract. Those are operational issues. We can do whatever the council prefers in terms of use of reserves, and there's just 2 different cost points.
Vice Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you. All right. I appreciate that. That makes more sense to me now. I think that the Saturdays and Sundays have whole different personalities, and what people do on Saturdays and Sundays have different personalities. I believe that the 10 a.m. on Saturday would be preferable for me. Leave Sunday as it is. With regard to reserves, I would normally and historically have been extremely reticent and conservative about using reserves, but in this case, for $35,000, it would be an expenditure that I could support.
I'll just make a comment as well. I think that when many communities are talking about how to cut their library hours, or they build libraries that they can't open, this is a very fun conversation to have when we're talking about expanding the library hours. What I did here was $25,000 buys us 2 hours, and $35,000 buys us 3 hours. Doing quick math in my head, I think we get more bang for our buck getting the 3 hours. So I would probably go with the 10 to 5 on Saturdays as well, and I'll echo what the Vice Mayor said, who also happens to sit on the Finance Committee with me, and we were the ones who put down in writing the reserves policy, and I would say I'm more than reticent. I'm generally against using reserves for anything, but we have a showpiece here that is getting tremendous use, and if we can provide more services to our citizens, I'm all in favor of it. Mr. Brzezinski.
I think the question of using reserves is universally believed to be something we want to use only as a last resort. And because we have had that attitude and reinforced in the Finance Committee, we are in position to accommodate these unforeseen circumstances, like a $580,000 potential hit from PERS. I want us to be very cautious about adding expenditures at this moment in time. I don't disagree that the extra hours for the library would benefit the community. But I also hear this kind of a work in progress. The operational nature of what's going to happen has been raised as a potential problem for the staff. I'm wondering if we can ask the staff to consider the recommendation and confirm what the consequences are for the operational nature before we go and commit. The other thing I'd like to indicate is that if we do add the hours to the Saturday morning sequence, that we do this in the context of attempting to open the library, but monitor the usage, so that when we get to the end of the fiscal year, we should actually have this discussion one more time, and not necessarily lock in to this particular sequence. We may find that as our library usage in the course of this next 4 months or so, as it demonstrates itself, we might find that there can be other adjustments that we can make that would benefit the community. I hate to see people locked out. In fact, I was there early on, I think it was Saturday, and was surprised that it wasn't open when I got there, and I guess they think the world's, circles me or something. But when I looked at the timing, I realized that I was a bit early. But I would be curious as the next few months progresses, if there would be some time that would not necessarily demand that we be open, so that those adjustments can be made on the basis of the actual usage of the library. So that would be my only caution about this. I support the idea of an earlier opportunity for our community to use the library on Saturday.
Mr. Manager.
So following council action, we'll take this as a temporary increase in operating hours, or should it be built into the base budget for next year as well?
Vice Mayor.
Given we have a 1.8 problem already.
My response, based on my thinking and what I heard Mr. Brzezinski say, is it would be implemented now, and then it would be monitored statistically to see what we would do with it when we come to our next fiscal year analysis, which will be in May.
And do we include the expanded hours in that budget proposal in May or not, and the additional minimum of $100,000 of expense?
Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you. My original concept was this was a short-term special service to the community for the next 4 months, which is why I would like us to make a decision tonight, because otherwise we lose another 2 or 3 weeks in that period, and with no expectation that it would continue beyond that. I put it as kind of an expanded grand opening expense, because it really is designed, in my mind, was to, again, give a maximum opportunity to introduce the library to our community.
And I would actually second that. I would not expect it to be built into the budget that we see in May.
That would actually be staff's preference as well, because we'll have data to give you in May. Plus, we are seeing such an increase in circulation, visitor counts, and library card issuance just in 1 week. We're concerned already that the expense number you see there isn't large enough to maintain the current level of hours we have, and there may need to be an expense addition next year for current hours beyond what the forecast shows. and that's an issue we're starting to evaluate now. We're covering that this year because of the 3-week library closure. We had savings from that closure. We were able to spread over the remainder portion of this fiscal year to provide augmented clerks and pages, basically to process materials. That's not part of the budget for next year until we come back to you. So there could be an increase to the operating budget for the current library hours, and then a proposal for your consideration for continuation of the expanded hours, what that would cost, and what the service statistics have been for the months until then.
Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you. I believe you just answered the question of staff, which is assuming that this increase in hours and increased expenditure goes through July 1st, we would still have the statistics when it comes back before us, even though it's not built into the budget?
Correct. You would have whatever we have available when the budget comes to you in mid-May.
Okay. Any further discussion or questions on the finance? I believe we need a motion for the recommended action. Vice Mayor.
I'm going to do them all. I'm going to move that we accept the fiscal year 2011-12 mid-year budget performance and status report, including fiscal year 2011 and 12 financial projections, to authorize budget adjustments as recommended in the attached second quarter budget performance report, including and amending onto that the additional hours from 10 until 1 on Saturday morning, and the increased expenditure of, I believe, $35,000. And lastly, authorize the amendment of the town fiscal year 2011 and 12 comprehensive fee schedule, library internet printing fee.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, we're going to go back to pulled item number 4 from the consent agenda. I'll give staff a moment to shift chairs. And I'm sorry, before you start, thank you, Mr. Conway and Mrs. Hariyama, for your reports. So I was the one who pulled this. I had some questions which I've expressed to the town manager regarding this as well when I let him know that I was going to pull the item. In essence, my concerns were around, do we really need to do this extensive of an update? My read on the current Boulevard plan is that it's pretty current and didn't need maybe quite as extensive of an update as appears in the budget, and also that while we don't have to put this kind of a contract out for competitive bid, it was being done without one, and how do we know that we're really getting as much bang for our buck as we should get? So, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Had the mayor not pulled it, I was going to make a motion to pull it. And I don't know where we're going to go this evening, but the issues that came, that I had, were, one, the scope of the work. It seemed overly broad. And given the fact, especially since we identified the scope in 2009, and we've had a tremendous amount of land use issues and development and entitlements since 2009. We've had a lot of work on the North 40. And so, one, I have issues with the scope, although I don't have an answer as to the scope. I have issues. I have concerns about how whatever we decide to do, how that service is delivered, including whether or not it couldn't simply be done in-house as opposed to a consultant. Again, not saying that it should be done one way or the other, but that was an issue that was of concern to me.
Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I also considered pulling it tonight for similar reasons as what's already been stated. I very much remember the meeting in 2009 when Mr. Loritz was here at the time. We went through the Boulevard plan and said, gosh, this is pretty good. It needs some tweaking. It needs some refinement and clarification on views. We need to change the language regarding auto dealers, perhaps, but basically, we thought the principles outlined in the Boulevard Plan were excellent. So when I was preparing for the meeting, I went back and read through the Boulevard Plan yet one more time, fresh this weekend, and thought, gosh, it's pretty good. I think we did, and not we, I wasn't on council then, they did an excellent job. So I also had questions about the scope, which seemed to be much broader and more ambitious than what I had envisioned it to be. I had questions on clarifying what the traffic study purpose of the traffic study numbers were, what they would actually tell us that we don't already know or have not already received in other developments or with proposed developments. And I don't necessarily want to maybe go into that now because I have a feeling we have some broad issues to deal with. And then I, as a minor point, I wasn't comfortable with it going to the North 40 Advisory Committee as a review. That didn't seem to line up to me. I thought it would just be best to do the normal review with the using the Planning Commission as the first line of defense and then coming to council.
And Councilmember Przinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I guess all four of us would have pulled this item. And actually, this struck me a couple of weeks ago when we got this in items of interest as a summary, that it, in the context of what we are engaged in with the North 40 plan, this looked like a revisiting of the same process for the Boulevard. And yet the North 40 and the Boulevard are two very different environments. The North 40 being basically a blank sheet at this point, and the Boulevard, frankly, built out except for a couple of uses that remain, particularly the auto uses. I drove the Boulevard again today just to kind of make sure my view was accurate, and as I did, noticing that the ongoing demolition of the Honda dealership at Roberts and the Boulevard is indicative of a site soon to be developed. The approval and the soon to be initiated demolishing of the Swanson Ford site. What we know about CVS for the Boulevard in Los Gatos Almaden, and then the Gateway Boulevard office facility. As these are all progressing, they're approved or in the process of being approved. We don't really have an opportunity to shape these in different ways because we've moved down that road a piece. From Lark North, I think, is where the Boulevard development needs to be addressed. And it continues to be, something that is a work in progress, but south of Lark, it seems not to have the same type of requirement. And as I looked at the plan, and particularly looked at the expense of the plan, $153,000 estimate, I thought, this just isn't something we need to do. If there's anything that we can address now at this point, I think is the concept of complete streets, of the streetscape, the Boulevard traffic flow, the nodes, the accommodation of this to greater bicycle and pedestrian traffic. But I'm also aware that the VTA has the ability of working with us in design for those kinds of proposals, as they are doing currently with Campbell on their Winchester Boulevard build-out, which is a complete streets proposal. So in my mind, I think probably, given as has been indicated, some of the studies have already been done, such as traffic, the traffic counts at the Boulevard and Blossom Hill because of the Swanson Ford project, Lark and the Boulevard because of the Albright project and the proposal for whatever we're going to do on the North 40. I just don't see this as being necessary for us at this point in time. I agree with Councilwoman McNutt. The Boulevard Plan is pretty congruent. And the only thing that it missed back there in 1997 was the fact that auto dealers were going to go away. But that, to me, is a single piece that's being accommodated by the approvals already made, and we hope that the auto dealers that we have continue to stay in place, and it seems like there's some good chance that they will for a period of time. So my guess is we reaffirm the Boulevard Plan as it exists. We take a look at the possibility of a streetscape orientation and plan that it gets more specific than what we've got in the Boulevard Plan itself at this point, working perhaps with VTA, and I'd be happy to work with Todd on that in our relationship to VTA. But I think we can do ourselves a favor by not engaging in this process at this time, particularly given the expense of the process that we might be able to use for other planning purposes then within the community.
Mr. Manager.
Yes, the mayor and vice mayor informed me today they had questions about this item. I did ask staff prepare what we perceived as the council direction and the cost of each component. The council could choose from that list as it's presented on the screen, or simply reaffirm the existing Boulevard Plan and kind of negates all of this. I do think there was some particular discussion regarding traffic that Wendy and Todd wanted to have regarding some studies that might be appropriate and needed. Do you want to run through each of these council directions?
I can run through each of these. So there were 4 directions that were provided at the meeting in 2008, and that was to preserve the scenic vista opportunities along the boulevard, and staff has interpreted that to be a view analysis, a view shed analysis. And so we actually identified roughly, I think, 6 or 8 different nodes where we would actually do a view analysis, and then be able to superimpose different types of buildings to see how they would impact those views, and then be able to adjust those building heights and setbacks to make sure that those views in those key areas are preserved. So that task would run about $22,000.
I'm going to hit these one at a time, if that's okay, because my first question on that, and I'm jumping in, sorry. Any development that's going to come forward is going to provide that for us anyway. Would they not, or we would certainly require them?
They do not typically require a view analysis. At times we've asked for a view analysis, usually when we're doing the environmental review, but it's not a typical requirement that they provide a view analysis. And we don't have any standard requirements for a view analysis. That being said, we can create those. That's not a problem. But if you remember back on the Gateway project, the architect did some rough view analysis, but it wasn't anything to a standard that we would normally apply to all sites. It was their own judgment on what they would shoot, where they would shoot those pictures. It didn't have staff input to that. So what we would be doing is, we as the town would be doing that view analysis and then giving that information to potential developers on how they could develop their sites then.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. What doesn't make sense to me, though, is, I think a view analysis, I remember when we discussed this, it's an important issue to me, to maintain the vista of the hillsides. However, given the fact that we have approved just about every available site, with maybe 1 or 2 left, what benefit do you see of a generic scenic vista analysis given the approvals that have occurred between 2008, 9, and now?
We're not actually looking at those sites, because you're right, those sites have been just recently approved, and we think that the developers will carry forth with developing those sites. But we have a lot of underutilized properties along Los Gatos Boulevard. Give you an example where where the McDonald's is, I'm not sure the name of the center, where McDonald's is and the gym is. Yeah, so that area is ripe for redevelopment. It's very low scale. It's very underutilized. So, and this again would be a 20-year plan. So it's really those areas where we feel we did do some additional analysis, or we did identify some locations for additional analysis where CVS may go, because that project hasn't come forward. I mean, it's in the process, but hasn't been approved yet. But we really looked at areas where we thought redevelopment could easily occur.
Okay. Quan?
I'm sorry. Next one is provision and maintenance of enhanced public improvements and streetscape in consideration of alternative lane configurations. And that really is, for the most part, the traffic analysis that would occur, and that's at $46,400. And that was a pretty comprehensive traffic analysis, and I'll probably turn it over to Todd to be able to describe what that is and answer any questions.
Thank you, Wendy. That's exactly right. It's a rather extremely comprehensive traffic analysis that initially we thought we would look at 10 intersections that begin on the north end of the boulevard at Highway 85 and go as far south as Blossom Hill. But we also wanted the ability to include the last two intersections of Caldwell Kennedy and then the intersection at Saratoga Los Gatos Road as well. Because we would be looking at alternative lane configurations for the entire length of for that entire 1.8 mile stretch, it makes sense to us to take a look at the traffic patterns at each intersection as a whole. We tend to look at intersection traffic patterns individually as individual developments come forward, but not having the data at our disposal for how the entire stretch of roadway works doesn't help us in adopting or enabling or placing conditions upon future development that would allow us the opportunities to create bulb outs and better pedestrian crosswalks, lane narrowing, as we speak about Winchester, where you have the opportunity to actually remove a traffic lane and create better, safer pedestrian and bicycle travel lanes. So our feeling was that we needed to look at the entire stretch as a whole, which is something that we typically don't get the opportunity to do. Now, granted, that's a relatively high-cost item. We do look at as you know from your previous review of other proposals, we do look at individual intersections. But that, again, does not allow us to make changes half a mile away, which could result in an enhanced pedestrian crossing, a bulb out, the removal or addition of on-street parking. We tend to look at these things very narrowly, and this is an opportunity we felt to look at the entire stretch as a whole.
Councilmember Brzezinski.
Well, this is one that I'm very interested in, and I think that if you consider one of the major concerns of our community is traffic impacts, volumes of traffic, speeds of traffic, how the boulevard beyond Blossom Hill primarily starts to imitate the El Camino, which was something we said we were not going to do when we developed the boulevard plan, and then some later interest or orientation toward pedestrian and bicycle safe streets. I think that Mr. Capurso's issues here deserve our consideration. I see that if we were looking at this not as a standard traffic engineer would look at it, which would be the rule, how quickly can you get a vehicle from point A to point B, but rather how much can you enhance the environment of the community in relationship to traffic and transportation. Safe routes to schools, the fact that we've got a number of schools immediately in this area, the fact that that this 6-lane road has lend itself towards higher and higher speeds. I think that this is something that could deserve our attention. I also recall how many times members of the Planning Commission have indicated when they're looking at a new development, indicated the concerns relative to the increase in traffic that this would provide in an already highly impacted traffic corridor. So this is one I think we could easily parse and take a look at separately from the entire orientation.
I have a question on it, and that would be, as a part of that, would we end up with cost analysis of the improvements as well, or is this simply a study?
I don't believe that we would end up with cost information on doing a transformation to the entire section of the boulevard, although that is something that we could ask for. I think what we were looking more for were design standards that could be applied as individual development projects come through. Our ideal situation would be, as properties turn over, to place these conditions on the new development. But like you see in other cities, and Councilmember Prusinski mentioned Winchester Boulevard, there are also grant opportunities where a city, town, county can take advantage of having an adopted plan that you take forward as part of a competitive grant process. So we would have both options available to us. But the short answer is I don't know that we were looking at getting a single cost on making the improvements for the entire stretch. We were more interested in ending with a set of design standards that could be applied over the long haul. As Wendy mentioned, this might take us 10, 20 years, although we hope not, but we would implement as we go.
Okay, thank you.
The next item is protection of long-term retail, office, and other commercial opportunities. And for that, we would be considering an opportunity and constraints analysis, as well as a land use and urban design plan for a total of $13,640.
Questions? None? Okay, go ahead.
And then the next one is looking at building heights, massing, setbacks, again, really taking the view analysis and then expanding that into a plan that would then address our desires for the urban form along the boulevard. And that would really entail preparing the administrative draft and then also the final draft of the plan, and that's $32,240. Hearings and meetings would be roughly $25,000. That's assuming we would work with an advisory committee. And then lastly, other expenses, reimbursables, things like that, run around $14,000.
Okay, so the total on this is what we're looking at here?
It is, yes.
Okay.
It's plus or minus.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Vice Mayor.
Comment. I agree that if I were going to prioritize those, my first priority would be the second item there, which figures into traffic and lane configurations. My second priority would be some kind of vista analysis for properties that are not fully developed, because I totally agree. If you go along the boulevard now, you just know where development is going to be in the not too distant future. The last three line items under that, protection from there on down, they're not a priority to me.
Okay. Any other? Councilmember McNutt.
Sorry, slow here. Yeah, I pretty much agree with the Vice Mayor, and on the VISTA analysis, because I remember very much that conversation, and especially when we were doing Gateway, the discussion of which hills, which mountains. We are in a valley, so it kind of goes all the way around. Going north, going south, those annoying trees that block views also. I mean, it was more defining. I guess I had a much simpler point of view as what we were talking about here, but it was more defining our terms and kind of setting principles for how we would go about analyzing what view impacts would actually mean, rather than something mechanical that would be put before us as a technical document. But otherwise, I agree with the Vice Mayor.
I think I'm in agreement as well. I think from a, that's what I'm looking for, from a logistical standpoint, I'd rather see this come back in more of a menu format as opposed to an all-encompassing format, to where we can pick and choose that which we want to do with the costs associated. And because I'm not comfortable with spending $150,000 on this as I see it at the moment. Councilmember Brzezinski.
Yeah, I don't want to be redundant here, but I will be, I guess. Yeah, this is not the time or the place to engage in this particular study at that price. The outcome of this comprehensive study, which would be done in the near term, would have a shelf life as far as I'm concerned, because any development that takes place, let's say you looked at the Newtown Center. I personally don't think necessarily it's ripe for development. I think that when you look at development in our community, it doesn't happen that way. What happens is usually the places that are more inclined are the ones that have been around for a long time and not improved, and Newtown was improved in relatively recent future, at least, or recent past as far as our town timing goes. So I don't see that happening. I think that what we're going to see are some specific infill proposals. And as each come forward, it's going to be a developer who comes forward. A lot of the times, I think, just from the understanding of what our town's about and reading our general plan, people pretty much know. Things, you're not going to come in and put up a 5-story or 6-story glass and chrome building somewhere on the boulevard. It's not going to happen. And so the dialogue with the developer who would make a proposal can take place at the level of the Community Development Department, because I think the Community Development Department is quite capable of expressing the orientation that the town has at this time. So I would think for us, the issues from protection of long-term retail all the way down to the end really are not relevant. Because to me, I'm not going to spend money on things I don't see product, and the product to me is not a report. Product is actual the ability to interface with a project or a developer who comes forward and says, "This is what I'd like to see," and we, through our process, conducted both at staff level, Planning Commission, and here, we have the ability, with what we know, to go ahead and shape that project according to what our town character is. So I would say, the menu can be a short menu, as far as I'm concerned, but definitely I'm not interested or willing to go into an expenditure of $150K for the proposal as we have it in front of us tonight.
Staff have enough feedback?
Wendy and I had a side conversation. We will revisit the proposal, focusing on the first 2 bullet points, and try to scope that and bring it back at one of your future meetings, probably as the mayor suggested earlier, with the reaffirmation of the existing Los Gatos Boulevard plan as the framework for that subsequent work.
So do you need a motion to continue this to a...
Since we don't know the meeting to continue it to, I think we'll just re-agendize it when it is ready to come forward.
Right. Okay. It's the last item I have on our agenda. I'm going to remind the community we are adjourning tonight's meeting in memory of a community friend and leader, Paul Dubois. We will miss him, and we are adjourned.